Welcome back to Mess Makes Meaning. Here we are making meaning out of this messy and beautiful life, nurturing our children's spirituality through wonder, story, rhythm, and play. I'm Joyce Studer.
And I'm Raynell Taro. Joy and I are so excited to have our guest, Reverend Harrison Litzell, with us today. Harrison is the program coordinator at the Baugh Center for Baptist Leadership at Mercer University in Atlanta, Georgia. He has worked in children's ministry for over 10 years and works now to provide resources and training around inclusive worship, neurodivergence, and other topics relevant to children's ministry. Harrison has been on his own journey of meaning, which has included being assessed for autism and recognizing the way this impacts the way he experiences and navigates the world and his work. Welcome, Harrison.
Thank you so much. I am excited to be here. I got to meet y'all not too long ago, all the way on the other side of the continent. And as I was leaving there, I was like, oh, what wonderful weekend friends I got to make. And now here we are again, so soon after being able to talk and not only talk, but have it recorded and shared. And I'm just excited and grateful to you all for the work you're doing and choosing to invite me into it as well.
We are absolutely pumped to have you, Harrison. And I just want to thank you for your raw honesty about your own journey that you've been figuring out along the way. So thank you for sharing that with everyone today. And our weekend time in Vancouver, BC was incredible. However, you and I didn't have this conversation that we're about to have today. And so I'm so excited because this has been a long time coming. So today, folks, we are diving into permissive versus gentle versus authoritarian parenting. We live in a world of information overload, especially for us parents and caregivers. We're all hoping to keep our kids out of too much therapy if possible. And I believe that we're all doing our best. And I'm certain that's true for those grown-ups who are listening to this podcast. And all that to say, whatever your parenting style is, we're all here to learn and grow and be the best versions of ourselves for our kids. So let's dive right in. Harrison, can you give us some brief definitions on what these different styles of parenting are, that gentle, permissive, and authoritarian?
I would be happy to. Yeah. So I think that gentle parenting seems to be having a moment, right? That's kind of the one that gets a lot of press and conversation. And the thing that I think is really interesting is that gentle parenting is almost completely synonymous with authoritative parenting. If you're doing reading in kind of peer reviewed literature or other research, you won't see as much about gentle parenting, but you will see authoritative parenting. And I think it's just interesting to me the interchange of those two words. But the way that I've kind of understood these different types of parenting is in my mind, I see these two kind of binary switches of on and off or high and low. One of them is for parental warmth or affection, and the other
Mm.
one is for boundaries. And so you have, if you have high warmth and low boundaries, that would be permissive parenting. If you have low warmth and high boundaries, that would be authoritarian parenting. If you have low warmth and low boundaries, that would be neglectful parenting. And then if you have high warmth and high boundaries, that would be authoritative, or gentle parenting is kind of a subsect with inside of authoritative parenting that uses not only that high warmth, high boundaries, but also builds into it kind of an emotional learning component and an emotional regulation, not only for the child, but also the parent and caretaker.
Like that visual representation you were doing with like these levers. This
Hmm.
really helps me soak that in.
Yeah. I Yes, it was the same for me. I was like, "Oh, I thought I understood all those different types." And so it was actually very helpful for the comparison of low and high in those areas. Harrison, whether it's a generational point of view or a preference for a certain parenting style, or maybe even a held belief on how kids should behave, I've heard the comment more than once that we've just lost all control of our children in this generation. We're too actually even the other day I heard somebody say we are too nice to these kids during I was at my daughter's softball practice, and someone just said that out loud. We're being too nice to them. They were practicing in 90-degree weather, and we're being too nice to them. Um, what are your reflections on what we're seeing with children in today's world, Harrison?
Yeah, there's a lot. I think some of the places that I try to remind myself from a place of like compassion to this question is childhood in of itself is a relatively new phenomenon, right? Like historically speaking, childhood didn't exist really before the Industrial Revolution. And so like we are still kind of building this idea of like what does it mean to treat somebody in a developmentally appropriate way, that these are children, not just small adults. And so that kind of recognition of like it's okay for us to continue learning this, and that we should approach it with curiosity rather than judgment. um, the other thing that I think about is I think, yeah, that question of we've lost control or how do we gain control, I think it does just speak to this kind of difference in goals of what it is we want to achieve for our children and with our children. And I think that's something that we're continuing to learn about of what does it look like to not just or not even at all control children, but to nurture them and set them up for success in the future and now. And I think that is just kind of a different paradigm in some ways, a different perspective. That's something that we are kind of growing into and gaining new resources and new understanding for. And so, what I would think when I hear that kind of comment of we've lost control of the children, um, I think sometimes I'm like, well, what does control of the children look like, and is that what we should be after? Um, and the kind of recognition for myself of we can know better and do better, and just trying to hold that grace not only in my own parenting and the way that I talk about parenting, but hold that grace and compassion for others who are parenting differently or others who have parented in the past, because parenting too is such a personal experience. The second you start talking about differences in parenting, it is often understood and perceived as a comment about an own person's parenting choices or the way that they were parented. So that difference can often be interpreted as, what are you saying about my mom and dad? Or what are you saying about the way that I chose to raise my kids? Are you saying I did something wrong? And so I think like defenses just come up so quickly. And so I
Mhm.
think that like I try to like reintroduce compassion and curiosity into that, knowing that once those walls and defenses come up, the conversation's over anyway. And so what can we do to like tease those back down or move around them in some way?
Absolutely. I feel there are so many people who get defensive because we are trying to work so hard to do our best for our kids. And like you mentioned, that's such a personal journey. And I know that my own parenting style is always changing as I work hard to be the best parent for each of my children, who are very different children. However, what I try to do consistently is offer respect to my children. And I believe in modeling that respect for and to my children, and in turn, they're starting to feel like they can be respectful to others, and they model that back. They will represent that. And I'm empathetic and actively listen to my children most of the time. There was definitely a time last night where I did not pull that off. And I see them mirror that back to many others in different ways. I'll see them really actively listening, trying to react back. My oldest does a lot of mm-hmm. When people are talking, he watches them and does what I do. And I don't think that this method, um, which I believe aligns with the gentle parenting, but you can correct me, in any way has me lacking in boundaries. Quite to the contrary, I definitely don't lack boundaries. I have boundaries that my children know and understand, and we keep. So, for example, lying. If my child comes to me with the truth and they know this, even if it's after they have told me a different story, I make sure to regulate myself as the adult and tell them that I'm really glad they came to me and hope that they always will. We're in that preteen stage. There's going to be a lot of this. And then we tackle whatever it is that's going on together. There seems to be a myth that there are no boundaries in gentle parenting. And people think that that's more permissive. And I know from your little lever maneuver that you just did earlier that that's not the case. Can you talk about boundaries and gentle parenting a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. I think that that is one of the most pervasive myths of gentle parenting is that it lacks boundaries, and I don't think that that myth is. I think that there's a reason for it. I think that there is some misinformation and even disinformation on gentle parenting around because it is having this kind of trending moment. There's so much information. If you Google gentle parenting, it is just a list of YouTube videos and TikToks and all of this other stuff, and from a lot of people who are doing their best but also don't aren't some of them aren't doing gentle parenting even if they're labeling that, or some people are um they're making comments or critiquing gentle parenting without actually knowing what gentle parenting is. So yeah, I think it is a very pervasive myth, and I think that that's one of the reasons why I often lean on that language of authoritative parenting and kind of say like, hey, this is what gentle parenting is. It is authoritative, because that can kind of bring people back into like, especially if there is that like generational or cultural difference between like we're losing control of our kids. If I say like, well, let's try gentle parenting, they're like, oh no, that's what I'm talking about. I don't want to do that. But if you're like, hey, what do you think about authoritative parenting? They're like, oh yeah, authoritative parenting. That sounds like something I'm interested in. Um, and so like just to kind of allow the language to be helpful in that way. um but yeah, I think that gentle parenting, it has that empathy and that emotional language, and part of growing up and going through childhood and adolescence and into adulthood is the development of skills. And I think that that as the parent and caretaker, like that's part of our responsibility. As you said, like you have the skills and you have easier access to the skill of emotional regulation than a child or an adolescent does. And so, as the adult, to be able to utilize that skill and to regulate your emotions and to model that, and then to still hold the boundary. And that is what gentle parenting is using that warmth, using that care while still holding those boundaries. And I think that there's a part of it where it is a consideration for ourselves as the adults to wonder and think about what boundaries are actually helpful and necessary in our child's life as opposed to just arbitrary boundaries. I think that for me, that is one of the ongoing kind of challenges and calls of gentle or authoritative parenting, is to say, I set this boundary, and then for me to be like, wait, why did I set that boundary? Is it actually serving a purpose? What purpose is
Mm.
it serving? How does it serve? And then thinking about consequences and all those other things. It is much more thoughtful about those kind of different dynamics, and it can be a challenge and a hard part of this, but I think it is an important aspect as well.
That makes me think of the, "Because I said so," right? Like,
Yeah,
I
right.
mean, maybe your parents didn't do this, but, I was raised where "because I said so" could be a response. "Mom and dad, I love you so much." And I know that that is something I have n I have yet to say, I'm not gonna say never said, yet to say to my children because I know they need that why. They need the
Mhm.
compassion
Yeah.
of me empathizing with the fact that they need to understand why the boundary's there. But once they understand why the boundary's there, they really receive it. Like, okay, this is a safety issue, right? This is to keep me safe. So, yeah, thanks for lifting that up.
Well, Harrison, you mentioned that yeah, this is an area that is difficult for people to kind of grasp altogether. So we're going to stick with it just a little bit more. I think when, everyone hears gentle parenting, and it's pretty easy to understand this warm way of being with our children, right? You think gentle, you imagine rainbows and puppies and, oh, I love my children and all that. And then come the boundaries and the consequences. And some days, definitely, I will be the first to admit, are harder than others because, like, it's pretty easy to want to love on my children, but the entering the bringing that warmth, like you talked about, into the boundary, that warmth into the consequence. There's days that are harder where how do I do that without feeling, how do I bring that warmth over so that I don't end up feeling like I'm talking about switches. Now I'm warm mom and now I'm mean mommy. How
Oh,
do
yeah.
I, yeah, how do I
The
not just
guilt.
all of a
The
sudden, it's like,
guilt.
yeah, Dr. Jekyll, now it's mommy is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But really bringing that idea of the warmth in this way that consequences feel consistent and do provide that safety, instead of feeling like I just lost control of myself, bringing in that regulation. Do you have tips on how we kind of bring that warmth over?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. So I think I'm gonna say I have kind of 3 things, and we'll see if I have the memory to make it through all 3. So the first one I think is, like, um, warmth and affection, making sure that the giving or, the way that we share our warmth and affection are not a part of the consequence, right? So, like, if we're upset with our child or if they've done something, we don't take away the warmth as a way to punish.
Mm,
That even when holding those boundaries, the warmth remains. And I think we can see this like if in terms of safety, there are times, in my work with like neurodivergent children and things like that. One of the things with neurodivergence and autism specifically can be children who elope, children who just make a run for it out of a space. And so there are times like I've worked in a preschool where my job was to sit in the doorframe of a room while a child who had been trying to escape is still trying to escape. And so like the process of that time is like I am here as a physical boundary so that they can remain safe, but I'm not going to be mad at them. I'm going to continue to show warmth and affection, even as my body acts as a part of a physical boundary. And that, I think, to what Joy was saying earlier, like that's the part where we have to, as adults, really call on those skills that we've been developing to say, like, I have to hold on to this warmth, even as this child is actively working against me. And then I think the next step of that is the willingness and the ability to say sorry, to acknowledge like we're never going to be perfect about this, and that's not the goal, and that's not realistic for anyone. And so to be able to say, "Hey, I lost it a little bit. I withheld my warmth. I switched into, to Mr. Hyde or Mean Mommy or whatever it is, and I saw it, and I know you saw it, and I'm sorry." And and let's work together on this. Um, I don't think we can underestimate or understate the power of an apology to a child
mm,
from an adult. Not only in that moment, but for that child's own perception of the world. If a child sees their primary parent, their primary caretaker, be upset, be mad, and then there's never any recognition of it, then
mm,
what you're kind of telling the child is there was no problem with that. You didn't see what you thought you saw. You didn't feel
mm,
what you thought you felt. But by acknowledging it and apologizing for it, we're recognizing their perception of the world. And we're saying, yeah, that didn't go the way I planned. That didn't go the way you planned. I'm sorry for my part in that. Right. The third part, look at me go, is I think that consequences, this is something that I'm working on, and so I'm trying to find the way to phrase it, is that consequences shouldn't be punitive. The
mhm,
point of the consequence, the point of the boundary shouldn't be to punish. Um, I think about this when there is a time when, like, if two kids in a classroom are or two kids in a home are fighting over a toy, one of the consequences can be like, oh well, this toy needs a break. This toy is not
mhm,
sparking joy for anybody. It's not helping us share and grow and play together. So it's going to have a break today. That's a good boundary. That's something that's helpful for everybody and also can like de-escalate some of the energy in a room, right? But if that toy now goes away today and then gets thrown away and never comes out again, that kind of moves into the punitive space. If
mm,
it's not helping anymore, it is just something to punish. And I think that for me, this is a place where I really have to be paying attention to my own self and where I really rely on my partner and on other people that I'm doing this work with because sometimes my own emotional state is escalated and I am like seeking that punitive measure, right? Of like, I'm upset. I don't want you to get to play with this toy again because I'm mad. But if my partner comes in and I am able to tell her, like, hey, this is what happened. So the toy's going away for today. I'm also thinking about just throwing it in the trash. She can be like, totally understand the boundary you set. You might have gone a step too far. And like to be able to have that support is really, really important. And I think that You know what? I think what I'm about to say is going to like segue into our next question and where we're going next. So I'm going to pause before I just like run away with it. But those are the three things that I had. I almost started giving you four and five, but we'll stop there.
I mean, I love it. This is really
Yeah,
helpful. And you also called
super
me out
helpful.
without meaning to, because I definitely threatened to throw away the Nintendo Switch yesterday. So, I mean, I took it away and also said, maybe it doesn't need to come back as I walked down the hall, right? My boys were both like, oh my gosh, we need to pull it together. She's
Yeah.
going to throw it out.
Well, thank you, Harrison. I really appreciate also the mention of the power. You said the power of an apology,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
In fact, my son the other day when I raised my voice and he does not like that. And actually he now I take this as a good thing that my children will are willing to let me know when I've done something that has upset them. So he will call me minutes later and then he'll tell me, "Mommy, it really you were really loud and I didn't like that." And so then it prompts me to I would have made the apology anyway, but it's a good space where it's immediate. I make that apology right away and I say, you were right, Betty. I did, that wasn't Mommy was not at her best in that moment. So
I
thank
think
you
we
for the
are the
reminder.
generation of parents who are going to apologize more than any other. And maybe that's because we didn't receive it a lot. And so we recognize the need even more. And I love that about us. I love that about us. I think it's amazing. I think it's beautiful. Um, you can't do better till you know better. So let's talk a little bit more about that myth of control that's been brought up a few times already. So we won't go too deep into everyone's personal lives here amongst us, but let's just say we had parents who were more authoritative or authoritarian. The my way or else, right? That lack of empathy, respect, autonomy, I feel is what chases possibly many of the children in that type of household to rebel in ways that they wouldn't have if they had felt heard, seen, and loved just as they are. So, what do you notice in parents having a desire or a need for control? Or even better, Harrison, what I'm thinking about is those grandparents who might say that we have no control over our children. How can we help those people who really do want to participate see that we're not trying to control our children? That's not our goal anymore in this generation.
Yeah. I think this is one of those places where if there was a quick answer that I could give you over this podcast, right? I would be out writing my own book and selling it all over. And the reason why, I mean, people might have written that book, but it didn't solve all the problems, right? 'Cause it's complicated and it's complex. And you all know that, and I know that, and I think the people listening to this probably know that as well. Um, I think so. One of the first thing that comes to mind, and this is Joy. You've already given a shout out to your parents. The odds that my parents listen to this very high. I live with my parents, and they live with my partner and I and my kids, and so like we kind of feel this dynamic. And I think that step one, the first thing that came to my mind is it's communication. Is just being willing to have this conversation. And this is the part where that kind of personal aspect of this is really going to show itself, right? When adult children talk to their parents about parenting, and I am going to parent my children differently than the way that I was raised.
Hmm.
The way that is often heard is blame. The grandparent hears that as I did something wrong. You are dissatisfied with the way that I raised you. And I don't know if there's a way to avoid or circumvent that part of the conversation entirely. And it might be more so of how do we make it through that. One thing that I have found to be helpful is to like equip grandparents or other parents with the resources that you as a parent use to learn about parenting. So like instead of saying, "Hey, this is what I do that's differently than what you do," to show them like, "Hey, this is the book that I read or the scholar that I listened to or the fantastic podcast that I listen to that talks to me about parenting," right? Because then it becomes like this thing. This is something that I use in a lot of educational spaces of rather than it being me giving you information and kind of separating us, it becomes, hey, why don't the two of us sit together and receive information from someone else, and then we can be in like a learning community together and say, well, what do you think about that? How does that sit with you? What is your response to that? And kind of have that dynamic of it. Um, and I think that when it comes to this myth of control, this idea of control, I do think it is just an ongoing conversation of honesty, right? Of saying like, I think that my goals of parenting may be different than your goals if the question is about control. But then also like there one of the things that I love about gentle parenting and authoritative parenting, one of the things that I've really learned about parenting in the past few years is that we have peer reviewed long term studies that show what is and is not effective in raising children, as adolescents, and into adulthood that will make them able to succeed, that will make them able to communicate effectively with people in their personal and professional lives, that will make them um, help them in conduct in school, that will help them to avoid risk behaviors as they grow older. All of these things, we have data on that. And I think that parenting is one of those places where, because it is so personal and it's so anecdotal, that we kind of forget that that's there. And so, in order to say, like, I'm choosing to parent this way because I believe it is the most effective way to achieve fill in the blank. And that's kind of a place where you, as a parent, whether you have articulated it before or not, to be able to articulate what it is that your aim is in the way that you're choosing to parent. Because that might help in order to move through that conversation of, you're right, my children are not under my control in the same way that you might expect, but it's because I'm working to do what it is that you are trying to achieve. And I
Right.
think that setting that up and offering that can be, again, a helpful tool. But I also, it would be insincere of me to say in any way that, like, take these 3 easy steps and you'll navigate this conversation perfectly. Right.
Oh, but it'd be
But
so much
instead, just
easier.
wouldn't it? Yeah, yeah, it would. That is one of my favorite things to do, though, is when people ask me a question. I'm like, oh yeah, if there was an easy answer to that question, you would know it already. And so like it's just kind of a little bit of like I don't have a full answer for you, but I'm going to do my best to um, walk through it together. Because what else can we do?
Still very, very well. You're walking through it together is very helpful, Harrison. um, so moving on to a little bit of a different tangent. Am what I maybe the staff that I'm on would say I am an empath. I tend to be the feeler, um,
The crier.
of the crier of the group. But in general, I think this way of being empathetic is very important to me. And teaching my children to do this is also important. And so I find that it also helps my children understand self regulation a little bit, this practice of thinking about what someone else might be feeling, but also what they are feeling themselves and how they can encounter and respond to what's going on inside of them. Is there one type of parenting that you would say emphasizes this empathy and self regulation more than another? Or if they all do this, how do they do that differently?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that part of empathy and kind of emotional learning is most commonly seen in the kind of authoritative or gentle parenting space. I don't know, and this is me really saying I don't know, not just like a coy way of saying no. I don't know if that is inherent or integral to the idea of authoritative or gentle parenting, or if it's something that kind of has grown within and alongside it. So I don't have a full answer for what it might look like in other styles of parenting, but I do think that it is a part of what it means. So at the beginning, I used that example of the kind of different switches with the high low. The other way that I think about it is it's like a circle. And I think of the circle is the boundary, right, that we have for our kids. Um, and so with authoritative parenting specifically, there is a strong noted circle. Authoritative parenting has boundaries that are clear and articulate and expected. But what exists within that circle, it's not hollow, because the hollow circle with high boundaries, a hollow circle would be like authoritarian parenting. There's high boundaries, but there's not a lot inside of that. But authoritative parenting, gentle parenting, has that circle. And then inside of the circle is filled with warmth and affection and emotional learning, right? And it's filled with this place where we're able to connect on that emotional level. Um, and so I do think that it makes the space for that. And it doesn't, and because the circle is still there, the boundaries are still there, there is still a, I see that you're frustrated. I understand why you're frustrated. I heard that you wanted a banana and we're all out of bananas. Ah, that is so disappointing. No, you may not throw an apple at me. That's not right. Like that's just because you're disappointed doesn't mean you get to make an unsafe choice. But I think that one of the aspects of this style of parenting is that high calling to hold both of those equally, to be able to see their emotions, to be able to name our emotions, and at the same time to be like regulating the environment. Um, that's a lot. And I think that as you read about gentle parenting, um, there are like a few kind of genres of articles and pieces you'll see on gentle parenting. And one of the ones that you see the most is the parents and caretakers who are trying to do this and who are doing this well are struggling because it's really
Mhm.
hard.
It's
And
so hard.
the world that we are in is not set up to have two parents full-time working and doing this style of parenting. Like it's just not. Um, and so when it comes to this, it is for me, it is always a reminder that um, it is hard. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not working. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's wrong.
Mm.
But because it's hard means that we should ask for the support that we need, that we should connect with the people we can connect with, and that we should recognize that in ourselves that parenting is taking energy and it's taking effort, um, and how we can make sure that we are recognizing that in ourselves as we continue to offer that space for empathy, offer that acknowledgement and that support for the kids that we're with and taking care of.
I love that so much. I'm hearing so much in that empathy is also the curiosity that you have as a mom right now. You do this very, very well. I can attest to this because I have been with you and your children on multiple occasions. But that empathy also comes with curiosity, and that in gentle parenting, you are entering into this space of being curious about why are they upset, or curious about why a Pikachu pillow just hit you in the head, or whatever it might be, or an apple in the case of this story, and entering that in a way that respects that boundary you've set. And anyway, shout out to all the parents who are saying this is hard. We're all feeling it. But it just shows how much we care. We care so deeply about this work. It is the most important work. Um, Harrison, I also heard a message throughout this time together that you have been kind of sliding in there, but we haven't really pulled out. And it's this need for community. You've said lean on your people, right? You've been talking about there are others out there. We're in this together. The grandparents, this need for community and connection with others who are doing this work. So think of your people, call your people after you listen to this podcast and connect with them. And just know that you're not alone in this. So I am looking forward to hearing so much more from you on this subject, Harrison, and I'm sure our listeners are as well. So we have a fun surprise for everyone. I feel like we've been doing that a lot lately. We will have Harrison leading a webinar, which is free to all of you, thanks to the Everyday Godly Play Project. This webinar will be October 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, going more in depth on these styles of parenting, what they are, and how others can be supportive as parents, caregivers, extended family members, and even clergy and religious leaders. All are welcome to come and learn from Harrison, so please register for this event linked in the description below. If you can't make it live, this will be recorded for all who do register. So, Harrison, before we go, we love to send our listeners with a blessing. Would you do the honors today?
I would be happy to. This is a blessing that I wrote when I worked in a church and children's ministry. And it was something that we began to offer every week to children there. And whenever I have the opportunity, I love to share it with others. So please hear this blessing. God made you on purpose. And there are people here who love and support you. Today, you can be your authentic self, include someone, and disrupt what hurts others, just as Jesus showed you. Amen.
Amen. Until
Amen.
next time, friends.